Welcome to this TecQuipment live Q&A session today, which is Wednesday, the 29th of July. My name's Dion Knowles and I am the marketing manager here at TecQuipment, and I am joined by Matt Kirchner. Matt, are you there?
Indeed I am, Dion. It's great to see you.
Fantastic. It's good to see you as well. As well as being joined by Matt, in which state are you in, Matt? Do remind me.
We are in the state of Wisconsin, right near Lake Michigan in the Midwestern part of the United States.
Brilliant. And as well as Matt there, we've also got our digital Dave Giddings here. Dave is currently based in the TecQuipment Long Eaton headquarters factory. Are you there, Dave?
Yeah, good afternoon, Dion. Hi, Matt. I was in Wisconsin back in late February, I think, early March, and we hit some weather. I'll leave it at that. We hit some cold weather.
Brilliant. Right. Well, have you got better weather there in Long Eaton, Dave?
Always sunny in Long Eaton.
Oh, fantastic. What about you, Matt? Is it good weather with you today?
It is. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Mequon, Wisconsin.
Yeah. Fantastic. If you are watching this live, people like Andy Ratcliffe, who are watching this live, do let us know who you are and where you're watching from, and maybe what your weather is like. Is it sunny with you as well, or are you one of the unfortunate few? Okay, so today we're going to be talking to Matt Kirchner. Matt is going to be telling us about a study that they did in their organization, interviewing academics from institutions across their region about how they're preparing for education in the fall. So we'll be talking to Matt about that. We'll also be talking to Dave Giddings. Dave will be reflecting back on this whole series of Q&A live sessions. And here on the screen now, you can just see some of the amazing, well, in fact, most of the amazing guests that we've had with us over the course of this session. Right, so over to you, Matt, now. Matt, do tell us more about this study that you've done and why you embarked upon it.
Well, thank you so much, Dion. And first, let me congratulate you on a great series. What a great 4 months you've had, and that slide that you just had up there showing all the distinguished guests. I'm certainly honored to be part of that and to be taking you out in a big way here on the final day of your series. So congratulations on that. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. We are all dealing with crazy times in education and technical education, and trying to find ways to morph our businesses, morph our educational institutions in such a way that we can respond to the changing ways that we're educating our students here. So one of the things that was really important to us is Lab Midwest, and we are a mission-driven company. You know, our job is to create opportunities for people of all ages in STEM and advanced manufacturing, and we do that by delivering learning systems such as the great ones that TecQuipment provides to customers all over 7 states. So for those of you familiar with the Midwest, we're in the upper Midwest. We're the 7 states at the kind of top of the map in the central part of the United States. That territory comprises about 28 million people. And because of that, we work with educators of all kinds, rural educators, urban educators, K-12 districts, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and then all the way up into community colleges and universities as well. We have connections with tons and tons of educators, and we find as part of our mission, sharing as much information as we can with them about how they can be as effective as possible in delivering learning is a really important part of what we do. And so we took it upon ourselves as it became clear that technical education was not going to look this fall like it did last February when Dave was here, for instance. And Dave, we certainly know all about that cold weather you experienced while you were here. Fortunately, this time of year, we're more like in the 80s, which is great. But we took it upon ourselves to interview and to survey educators across those 7 states, and in some cases across the United States, to understand how are they preparing for learning in the fall. And if I do say so ourselves, some of the results were quite fascinating.
And what do you think, taking this, what were the highlight results really? And do feel free to share your screen at this point.
Certainly, yeah. I'll bring that screen up, and I'll probably be jumping around just a little bit. So I do ask our audience to bear with me if I'm skipping around here in PowerPoint, but my screen should be up. You see the slide, of course, Dion, is that up there?
Yeah, we can see that all clear. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we asked a variety of questions. We asked questions about what modes of learning were most popular last fall, how prepared were universities, K-12 districts, community colleges, how prepared were they to transition to an online environment? What modes of online learning were they using? Were they using e-learning? Were they using virtual skills? Were they using lectures? We asked about what their biggest challenges were. We asked about how much of their learning would be delivered this fall online versus in person, and looked at the change between last year and this year, and how that is continuing to evolve. So asked some really, really interesting questions, we thought, and came up with some really interesting responses. I'm going to jump to one slide, and then I'll hit back to you, Dion, and let you run your interview here and answer the questions as they came up. But in answer to your question, one of the things that we thought was really interesting, probably the most fascinating thing about how education is changing, is one of the questions we asked was how much of your learning was being delivered online as we headed into COVID. So January, February last year, and this is what it looked like at the university level before COVID. 80% of our respondents said that less than half of their learning would be delivered online. So before we went into this crisis, less than half of the learning was delivered online by 80% of our respondents. About half was 20%, and there wasn't any respondent that said that more than half of their learning was online. Now, I want you to look at how that data flips as we head into September of this year. So same question, how much of your learning is online? And the answer to that looks like this: less than half. Only 10% of universities that responded to our survey say that less than half of their learning will be delivered online. About half was 50% of those universities, and more than half was the remaining 40%. So literally 90% of our learning, and depending on how you look at it, 90% of our respondents said that at least half, if not more than half, of their learning would be delivered online this fall. And that is a huge transformation from where we were just a year ago, and not even a year ago.
Wow, that is significant, and it's been admirable how people have adapted during this really difficult period. I think you were telling me earlier how you worked with one university. Was it somebody you know where they'd have 6,000 courses in 3 weeks? Did you mention?
That's exactly right. You're referring to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, which is the largest university here in southeastern Wisconsin, 28,000 students. We know a number of the people that are responsible for running that university. One of our many favorites is a gentleman by the name of Johannes Britz, who's the provost of that institution. And he told me exactly what you just said, which was they had 6,000 courses that they needed to transform from an in-person platform to an online platform in 3 weeks. So think about the magnitude of a project like that, taking all of that content, 6,000 different courses in a magnitude of 3 weeks, and asking your faculty to turn those into courses that can be delivered online. It was a huge, huge ask. And it really leads us into the question about how prepared were our universities and our primary and secondary institutions and our community colleges to make that change. And I'm happy to share that slide with you when you think
All right, go head
right
on to that, because there's one thing being prepared to do online, but there's also being prepared to be able to switch, isn't there? Because we don't know where we're going to be. We
Exactly.
could be in the classroom in one moment, and then it could be full lockdown again, and nobody can go anywhere, and we're all back at home again, and we've got 2 days notice or something like that.
Exactly right. And so as we head into the fall, obviously educators have, relative to what they had earlier this year, have had a little bit more time to plan for that. In terms of where they were heading into the crisis, we asked the question, how prepared were you to move to distance learning? The responses actually surprised us just a little bit. If you look at this data here, 4% said they weren't prepared at all. So a relatively small number of our respondents said that they weren't prepared at all. 23% said, the scale of 1 to 5, they were about a 2. When it came to somewhat prepared, 43% of our respondents felt their institutions were somewhat prepared. And then we look at 4 on a scale of 1 to 5, and then very prepared. Those numbers were 24% and 6% respectively. So what that tells us is a full 73% of our educators felt that they were at least somewhat prepared to move online. Now, prepared to move online and prepared to move online and deliver the learning effectively, I think, are two different questions. But certainly there was a fair amount of work that had been done in advance of the crisis, to where our institutions felt that at least to some degree they were prepared to deliver learning that way.
Okay, well, I guess they've still got time, so there might be a different, hopefully they'll be in a different position come at the beginning of the term. But there are many challenges, and we all, if you've got kids or you're working with students, you'll have a flavour of the kind of challenges. Matt, I believe this was one of the questions you asked about what are the biggest challenges that people are facing in terms of distance.
That was one of our questions, Dion. And let me just jump down to those slides here, which I think are start right about here. And they are right there. So one of the questions we thought would be one of the challenges we thought would be quite common among our educators was that of funding. So we have this huge sea change in education. We're moving everything online. So there's a question around how prepared are we from a funding standpoint? Was the operating capital available to be able to facilitate that transition? We thought this would be a really common challenge that was faced by our educators. We spend a lot of time with educators. I know you do too. Everybody has great ideas. There's not always enough money to go around to implement them all. And we certainly hear those stories. But here's what we found. For our K-12 districts, which would be our primary and secondary educators here in the U.S., 42% of them cited funding as a challenge. I thought that number would have been higher. Community colleges, 38%, and about half of our universities. So when it came to challenges, what we found was that there were some challenges that were more common, quite a bit more common than funding itself. And so as we look to what those questions were, one of the questions was moving to a new LMS. And for those of you that are into that kind of thing, you can see up here on this pie chart what percentage of each of our respondents were using which learning management systems, which was interesting. But we asked the question, was learning a new learning management system a challenge for you? Only 1 in 7 of our K-12 districts cited that as a significant challenge for them, and only 1 in 5 of our community colleges. At the university level, it was more like half, and we suspect that this is because our K-12 districts tend to use those a little bit more proactively, and so we're probably a little more accustomed to using their LMS, where that might have been new to some of our universities. Student access to technology. Just stunning to me how many schools had serious problems moving both hardware and providing internet access to students. So when we talk about hardware, we're talking about things like Chromebooks. We're talking about access to laptop computers or desktop computers where students can actually perform their online learning. So 58% of our K-12 districts, 59% of our community colleges, and 60% of our universities cited that access to hardware was a significant challenge. And so as we moved online, one of the biggest challenges, and I live in a world where just about everybody we interact with daily has a computer, has a tablet, has some access to the hardware that they need in order to facilitate online learning. It wasn't always the case with a lot of our students at every level of education. Then when we look at access to the internet, these numbers were really high as well. So 59% of our community colleges, 60% of our universities, even more of our primary and secondary institutions said that access to broadband was a significant challenge. Anecdotally, we asked for input on some of these questions, and people told stories of creating Wi-Fi zones in parking lots at the community college, where a student would have to drive to the community college, sit in a parking lot in their vehicle to engage in their learning, which really gives you an idea of how serious some of these students are taking their learning if they're willing to go to that level to be able to continue their online learning. But access to hardware and to broadband was a significant challenge. We
on
also
the hardware, Matt, sorry, just go before you move on from hardware. Yeah. Was that specifically related to kind of computer hardware, or was it including like tablet hardware? Because I'd imagine lots of people have moved towards having tablets at home. For example, my kids have tablets, but right. They didn't have a laptop. I didn't end up going and getting my daughter a laptop as an early Christmas and birthday present, but right. Because I kind of got rid of that because the tablet was doing the job, but it won't do lots of the online learning stuff that you really need with a laptop. So
absolutely.
It encompass all of that.
Anecdotally, it was more access to Chromebooks, access to laptops, access to desktops was the bigger challenge. I mean, to your point, a tablet or a smartphone has some limitations in terms of being able to deliver online learning. We asked a question specific to hardware, so we didn't delineate between a tablet versus versus a computer. But in some of the subjective responses, because we enabled the the respondents to provide feedback qualitatively as well as quantitatively, and that in that feedback, it was clear that it was access to laptops, to computers, to desktops, and to Chromebooks.
Yeah, and I think when you go back to the whole Wi-Fi issue, yes, you might have Wi-Fi, you might not have amazing Wi-Fi, but you've got multiple people in the household battling the broadband, and that's where it then becomes more of an issue. It's certainly an issue in my house, particularly everybody has to go off everything when on live stream.
Right.
That's my slot of priority.
Yeah, well, we know who's most important then, right?
Yeah, for that moment of the day. Every other moment of the day, not really.
Absolutely.
Well, I have to bribe them though. It's McDonald's afterwards. That's what will happen. We're finished here and we're go for a drive-through McDonald's.
Yeah, only if everybody behaves, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Should we share a couple?
Carry on. Sorry, hijacked you there.
No, not at all. It's your presentation, so I'm happy to go wherever you'd like to take it. Finding the right course outcomes, e-learning for course outcomes was a significant challenge. And so we see that 27% of our K-12 districts, 34% of our community colleges, and 60% of our universities, which is frankly where we see something like VITAS eLab that you announced last week being a huge opportunity for institutions of higher education to provide interactive opportunities, either simulated skills or e-learning course outcomes for our higher educators, because that is a huge challenge, especially at the university level. So that was a challenge that people had, creating e-learning opportunities that met the course outcomes and the competencies in their courses, as was finding ways to teach hands-on skills. Now, when this was by far the greatest challenge and the most common challenge that our respondents had. So when you think about moving all of this content online, most of the people that I've experienced in my years in manufacturing and my now 5 years in technical education that find their way into those types of educational pathways and careers, they're hands-on kinesthetic people. That's who I was. I was always a hands-on kinesthetic learner. Put me in a classroom and I struggled, but if I could do something, if I could interact with something, that's how I learned. And so many people in STEM fields and so many people in advanced manufacturing, that's exactly how they learn as well. So what happens to these students when we take away their opportunity to interact with equipment, to interact with training systems the way that they were able to before? So as we look at that data, 81% of our primary and secondary school districts said that was a major concern for them. Community colleges, 88%, and when we look at our universities, 90% of our respondents said that finding ways to teach effective hands-on skills was a huge challenge for them. And when we look across the scope of the responses that we got, this was by far the biggest challenge faced by our technical educators. And I think it says a lot about how we're going to have to think about technical education as we head into the fall, and to your earlier point, not knowing exactly how we'll be delivering it and having to be ready for just about anything.
Well, I know from the guests that we've had over the course of the last 4 months, we've had multiple academics who've come on and talked about, yes, this issue of hands-on skills, but it's about how do they engage people? How do they monitor their engagement? That's where it then becomes, yes, you can deliver something, but is it really engaging and meaningful? Yeah, it's a real challenge. I'm hoping that in some ways with our VITAS eLab, we will go some way to addressing that. And some students will be fortunate enough to be able to go into the lab and still get hands-on, but it will still mean that people who are shielding, for example, they've got to be really careful with their safety, they can still be hands-on in a remote sense. And that's almost an oxymoron, isn't it? But I guess they can interact. You can't actually physically touch the equipment. Yeah.
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think, it really is hands-on in a virtual sense. And you will never replace a hands-on trainer. You will never, replace the experience of understanding how fluid power works or how wind power works or how energy works without having that hands-on experience. But the more opportunities we can give students in a virtual environment to get as close as possible the more they're going to grasp those competencies, so that when they do get into that lab, and that lab time is going to be precious because of social distancing and personal protective equipment and scheduling time, as opposed to being able to just walk in, making sure that our students are as prepared as possible to make the best use of that time is really important. And I think you touch on exactly the challenge, which is how do we create those virtual experiences that are as close to reality as possible, so that we can create the most efficient educational experience for our students.
Have you seen a role of virtual reality playing here into this at all?
Certainly. Yeah. And it's interesting. That's actually morphed a little bit. We do quite a bit in mixed reality, whether it's virtual reality or augmented reality. So we do quite a bit in that space. Initially, everybody was afraid of taking, a headset and placing it on your face, placing it on your eyes. And it's like, wow, that's never going to work. As we've gotten further down the path and starting to understand that with proper sanitation and disinfection and educating students about how to use those types of tools safely, that they can be used safely. And so we've actually, just in the last 2 or 3 weeks, seen quite a renewed interest in virtual and augmented reality. And we think that'll play a significant part because those are the types of training systems that can be rotated from student to student, right? We can buy 10 headsets and share them among a cohort of 60 students, maybe a few days at a time throughout a semester, to provide those experiences. So we do in fact see that as a significant opportunity.
Okay, interesting. Good. Going back to what we were you were talking about virtual skills. Sorry, excuse me, I've got something in my eye. Being 51% of the total. I can't remember which point that was.
Yep, that's right up here. Very good memory. So,
I always make notes. The key is always to make notes.
Perfect. So here we have a video of just one example of a hands-on skills trainer. It happens to be a video that I had on my hard drive, so we made it the backdrop for this slide. And when we talk about virtual skills, we're literally talking about simulating the piece of equipment, whether it's training equipment or authentic equipment or a combination of both, in a computer environment. So here we have a student, for instance, building an electrical circuit, or electric relay circuit in a virtual environment. And that's exactly right, Dion. We found that 51% of our educators were using some version of online simulation and virtual skills in delivering, delivering learning to their students. But what was even more interesting than just a little over half using that type of a platform was how that broke down among the various levels of education. And so with your permission, I'll share a little bit of data around that. What we have here is in our K-12 districts, about 35% of our respondents said that they were using some version of virtual skills. So about a third, not a huge number, but a decent number. As we got to our community colleges and our technical colleges, that number jumped up to 56%. So more than half of them using some form of a virtual or a digital skill and practicing digital skills. When we got to the universities, this was really surprising to us. So I would have figured that our community colleges would be, by far the highest respondent here. In fact, it was the universities. So our universities, 80% of them, so 4 out of 5, were using some version of an online virtual skills trainer. So there again, the innovation that TecQuipment has shown us over the course of, certainly over the course of decades, but particularly the last several months with your new product offering, I think hits this market exactly perfectly in terms of our university engineering programs, especially in STEM programs, needing to find ways to provide virtual skills and those experiences to their students as we head into the fall.
Brilliant, really, really interesting. What was for you, I guess, the number one or the most surprising finding from the study that you did? Was it with 70 plus different institutions?
Yep, we had more than 70 institutions that responded to the survey. I think the most surprising one, and I'm just going to jump back to these initial one of these initial slides here that we shared with you. It was this one, and when you look at it, and this was the case in every level of education, the flip to an online environment and how much of our learning is going to be delivered online. I've been in business for more than a quarter century. I've seen big changes in manufacturing. I've seen the advent of automation, seen the advent of robotics. I've seen environmental regulations that changed entire industries and been a part of those kind of things. They create winners and losers. They create people that understand the change and take advantage of it, and people that kind of sit on their hands and wait for things to go back to normal. This isn't insignificant. When you talk about 80% of our institutions delivering less than half of their learning online, and that's now 90% is going to be more than half online, that you can't overstate the impact that is going to have on education. And this is not temporary. We are going to learn things about online education. We are going to learn things about virtual experiences that will change education forever. That when COVID is a thing of the past, and we all, hope and pray for that day, and we hope it comes sooner than later, we're not going back to the way that education was last spring. We're just not. It's going to be a different world. And those that figure out how to adapt to that new world of education are going to be on the winning side. And I think in a lot of ways, we're going to get even better at educating students and understanding which modes of learning, which work best for which students, and delivering the learning in that fashion. This is huge change. But for those that understand it and find ways to take advantage of it, it can be a really, really good thing.
I think one of the things that it was Roger Penlington, who's an academic at Northumbria University. He was talking a couple of weeks ago where we're talking about engagement and what's going to be the lasting impact of COVID. And one of the things that he mentioned was, catering for different learners, that being one important aspect, but also disabilities as well. And I think that's going to, as we reanalyze everything that we do, it may be that we are actually even better for catering for people with different learning processes, different disabilities, etc.
Yeah, I think there's no question to that. When you look at the different modes of learning, when you look at, and obviously disabilities can take a wide variety of forms, having different learning experiences, whether it's somebody that has a hard time getting into the classroom or a hard time doing a physical skill, or whether it's, some other challenge that an individual faces in their learning, I think you're exactly right. I think if anything, this creates more and more opportunities for our young people and people of all ages as they look at continually educating themselves, not just through their early years, but throughout their entire careers.
I'm sure you would agree with me. I think where we're going is we're going to be looking at a very diverse landscape of different tools and different ways of engaging with students in the future, so that we can cover all of those different needs and the extra challenges that come with engaging people in a distant sense. It will be really interesting to see where the industry goes over the next 3, 6, 12 months, years.
It will be fascinating. We look at we think there's about 7 different modes of distance learning. Maybe there's more, but it's everything from, it's live lecture, it's pre-recorded lecture. It is a student working one-to-many with an instructor. In other words, one instructor presenting a skill, for example, to a cohort of 30 students. Instructors working one-on-one with an individual student. So we're on a video and I've got a trainer in front of me, and you have a camera that you're looking through at that trainer, and you're coaching me through a skill as the student and showing me how to do that and learning in that fashion. We think that's going to be a big part of it. The virtual skills that we already talked about, rotational hands-on training. So we have a hands-on trainer, engineering science kit, for example, that can travel from student to student to student, even though they're not on campus, so that the education institution makes that available to the student and it travels around. And then finally getting into a hands-on lab and working in a safe fashion, socially distanced, properly disinfected. There's all these different modes of learning, and we're going to discover which of these work best. And the answer is not going to be the same for every learner. And I think that's one of the most exciting things, is that we all learn differently. And now we have this whole cadre of different learning modes that we can deliver to our students and make that learning as effective and efficient as possible.
Right, so we'll see what happens. Matt, thank you so much for that. I'm just reminding everybody who's watching live, this is live, so you can ask your questions to Matt. We also have Digital Dave poised in the background, there with all clad up in his PPE. He'll be answering your technical questions as well. So Matt, I'm going to give you a moment to rest while we just have bring up Digital Dave. How are you there, Dave?
Good, Dion. Thanks. I'm in the office today, our office / factory.
Very good, fantastic. Well, Dave, this is our last live Q&A session of the 4-month season. Can you believe it? We started it back on the 25th of March.
No, I can't believe it, Dion. I wouldn't believe that. That's incredible.
And back then, I would have had no idea that we would have had such a vast audience of participants, both watching and those guests who joined us from all walks of life, whether it might be students or video editors or psychologists or lecturers, and or even, you know, people like Matt with us today. What have been your highlights, Dave?
Well, just a challenge set by yourself and customers, and just not knowing what questions coming next, and worried about getting a convincing, suitable answer. Most of my answers are not short; they're not one-word answers, as you know. But I think we've coped pretty well, and it's been quite a good experience, Dion.
Good. Well, if you are watching this around the world, do let us know your highlights. Maybe there was some particularly comical moments that you'd like to bring our attention to. I know there were many. I just can't remember them. I've really not had the headspace to be able to sit back and reflect, to be honest. I can remember, you know, moments of disaster when internet's gone down and we've had to restart Zoom and restart Instagram. And that was pretty hairy. But then actually, once it's happened once, you get used to it, and it's like, oh, this is the same old thing again. So you prepared for it next time. You're a lot more cooler in response to that. And, you know, we've had all the animals. We've had your puppy online. We've had my dog and the kids and the rabbits. And
I know.
It's been
in this lockdown, I've bought a puppy. I've spilled coffee on my keyboard. I've eaten pickled eggs, noodles, all during the Q&A.
I'm rounded off by a Cornish pasty today.
Oh yes.
Not to forget.
Yeah.
I think that's a high note of cuisine to finish on, Dave.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Oh, fantastic. I do encourage people, if you're watching this today and you haven't seen many of our Q&A live sessions, then you do look through our live stream playlist on YouTube. We've got various engineers in there. We had, and a couple of engineers have gone and had babies as well since we live streamed and spoke to them. Ryan Langdon, the gentleman in the corner down there, he's had a baby boy. Dima Nasir on the right-hand side there, she had twin boys yesterday. Actually, both of those are engineers, and they were sharing their experience of being an engineer, what they like about being an engineer. We've had academics like Judy Raper, the president and dean of Teddy London, the likes of Roger Penlington, and he was really interesting because he was talking about actually STEM. Why is STEM giving engineering a bad deal? And he's got some interesting thoughts on that and the whole topic of engagement. We had Oliver Shaw from Trafford. Yes, he was. Just got to check my notes where Oliver was from again. Oliver, I apologise, but Oliver was a lab technician at a college in the UK, and they were talking about how they were actually running their lab sessions way before many universities and colleges were letting people back in, and they were really much pioneering the way of doing distance learning in the classroom. So some interesting perspectives there. I also really liked Ram Shankar's session. Ram was talking about sustainability. How do you prepare students as an academic? What kind of factors do you need to bear in mind for designing sustainably? Yes, you need to keep all the factors in mind. We're talking about some of, I don't like using the term, but soft skills, skills that are transferable skills that aren't necessarily niche skills, that as new technologies arise and evolve, you need to be able to take some generic skills and reapply your experiences to them. We also had Murat Islam. Murat is a fantastic story there. He was came from an acorn farmer family, and Murat tells his life of being a very successful engineer. He's very much of an advocate for engineering, but he also is very, very honest about mental health and his challenges with mental health as he's gone through his education and through his career. And that adds an element of realism. And particularly during COVID, you know, some people are really, really struggling. Many of us are struggling. And we had Dr. Jo Borrell. She was talking about how can you cope in COVID-19? How can you stay motivated? How can you stay, you know, so you're still talking to your housemates or your family members and getting space in your head and stuff. So I think those kind of sessions, they're really good to look back on if you've got some spare time and you want to have a break from Netflix. Check out the live stream playlist and watch back on some of those sessions that I've covered. Now, I want to quickly mention the new VDAS eLab solution. Last week, TecQuipment launched a new solution for remote and distance learning to improve engagement with practical teaching experiments. And if you missed that, again, you can see that back on our live stream playlist. I'm going to share my, my screen with you now and just briefly explain what this is all about. So it's very much in response to what people are saying in the market. They've still got challenges around delivering practical teaching. So we've come up with this solution, which has two elements. You've got located unlimited software. This is VDAS eLab software, and that is software that extends the VDAS capability so that you can remotely access live data. As a student, you can be connected to your lecturer or lab technician in the lab running an experiment, and you get a live feed of data into your own version of VDAS on your desktop. You can manipulate, record, analyze that data individually using that software. It's great in the perspective of a group learning scenario. We're talking about some learners really still really need to get hands-on. It's the only way they can actually do learning effectively. So in scenarios like that, you may have a member of a group that can go into the lab. They're the ones that run the experiment and the rest are working from home. You might rotate it so that a different member of the group goes into the lab each week. It also means that students who are perhaps are studying from another country, they might usually come to Texas A&M. For example, they might travel from, say, India and study at Texas A&M, but they can't because of travel restrictions. They can still study at Texas A&M remotely in India and get involved in the practical teaching experiments using VDAS eLab. We're also got a remote view hardware package, which is a multi-camera video for live streaming of experiments and demonstrations. So that means you can have lots of cameras looking at an experiment from different angles, and you can run that experiment at the same time as running VDAS eLab. So you've got a fully immersive experience, engaging experience there for you. So if you're interested in that, then do visit techquipment.com/VDAS-E-lab for more information. I will put that URL now straight into the chat box so that you can access that quickly. We've got latest videos on the video playlist there, and you can see that there. So that's pretty much us rounding up for today. I've got one very quick question from Sambit. Sambit is a loyal watcher of our live Q&A sessions. It's great to see you there. Sambit asks if we're able to do Scada functionality with VDAS eLab. The answer is no. VDAS eLab is a one-way communication of live data. What that really means is, it means it's using low bandwidth though. So you've got, well, Matt was talking earlier about the challenges of having broadband, and as soon as you're getting into control, etc., you are getting into up to a much greater bandwidth requirement. So it really does level the playing field by just having it so you're live streaming that experiment data. Matt, have you got anything more you want to add? Thank you so much for being part of this penultimate live Q&A series. It's been a great pleasure.
Without question. The only thing to add is just a sincere congratulations, Dion, for your great work. And it's this series, it's what you do in your YouTube videos, it's what you do on social media. you know, TecQuipment has just such a great level of exposure and such a great reputation on every single one of those platforms. And that's all thanks to you and your team doing this really, really important work. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on. I appreciate the opportunity to be your last guest. Hope we took you out with a great deal of excitement about what's happening here this fall. We're very excited about it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Matt. Really do appreciate those kind words. Dave, now this would not have been this would not even be here without Digital Dave, because Dave was the man who first came up with this idea. It was the week before, I think, or two before we're about to go into final lockdown in the UK, and Dave said, we need to take something online. We need to get more involved in the community. Let's give it a try, and look what it's become, some fantastic series. So thank you, Dave, the man.
You're welcome,
behind the shield.
It's been super enjoyable.
It has. I feel like I should have party poppers here or something, and I'm totally unprepared, to be honest, because I'm about to go off and film yet another video for VDAS eLab in the room next door, and you hopefully are going to do some more filming for me of that as well. So I'm hoping we'll be bringing another VDAS eLab so that you can learn more about the functionality of VDAS, the power of it. And so we'll be step by stepping you through that between Dave and myself. Thank you to everybody who's watched live and you've made comments, interacted. It has been a great pleasure. We are looking at what we can bring you in the fall, in September, October. I've already got guests who are really interested in joining us, and it may be that we do a series that focuses on, does a spotlight on different engineers and their lives, so that academics have real life people. You know, often they would have people come into the university and present what it's like to be an engineer. If they can't physically do that because of the social distancing requirements, I'm looking at how can we do that by facilitating our channel through TecQuipment. Because yes, I already have 5 people who are keen to do that with us then. So that's it. Thank you so much, everybody. Do subscribe to the TecQuipment YouTube channel if you're not already doing so. Check out the other videos, and we look forward to seeing you again in September when we go live once more. Thank you, stay safe, and goodbye.
Bye now.